Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. It is Monday, April 9th. We've talked a lot on this show about our nation's problem with guns and the failure by elected officials to make our laws better and protect our lives. As we're all aware, last week we saw Republican elected officials care more about the fact that 3 state representatives from Tennessee stood with gun violence protesters after the tragic Nashville shooting than they did actually meaningful gun reform legislation. Last week, we also saw Ron DeSantis pass a permitless carry bill. And all across the country, we're seeing Republican elected officials not only do nothing about gun violence, but make it even easier for guns to fall into the wrong hands. But it seems like things might be changing after the expulsion of both Justin Pearson and Justin Jones last week in Tennessee. And it seems like people are paying attention and that Republicans unleash something they will regret in the years to come. And to discuss this with me today are Shannon Watts and Jayden Speed. Shannon is the founder of Moms Demand Action, and Jayden is a high school student in Nebraska and member of Students Demand Action. Shannon and Jayden, thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. So, Shannon, I want to start with you because last week you wrote a tweet that really caught my attention and moved me. And you tweeted, "I've been doing this work for nearly 11 years, and today was the first time I cried because I can feel a shift in the zeitgeist in America's against gun extremism. It's happening." Tell me more about this shift that you feel.
Look, I think more and more Americans, after every shooting tragedy, do get off the sidelines. They do get involved. But to me, this felt like shining a light on the worst of gun extremism in this country and showing how it's interwoven with systemic racism and misogyny. And I think sunlight is the best disinfectant. And the fact that these 2 lawmakers were expelled in large part because they were Black, but also because they simply support common sense gun safety laws proven by data to work. And I'll just tell you anecdotally, we have lawmakers in the reddest of states who used to be Moms Demand Action volunteers. And I was recently in Missouri, and 4 Democratic women told me that when they were campaigning and knocking on doors, Republicans were asking them to put their signs in their yards in the most rural of areas because they are scared their kids aren't safe in their schools. And when I saw all these students just standing up and protesting and participating in civil disobedience, it says to me that something is shifting.
So I want to ask both of you more about the Republican response to this, but that's really just comforting to hear. At the same time, I know you mentioned Justin Jones and Justin Pearson. They weren't just Black, but they were also the youngest members of the Tennessee state legislature. And Jayden, I know as a young person how difficult it is to take in everything that's happening right now. But how do you feel what happened in Tennessee last week is changing the conversation among you and your peers, and the possibility that something is changing here?
I think young people are fed up. Young people know that we deserve better. And that's why all across the country over the last week, Students Demand Action organized walkouts at over 300 districts across the United States. That's why in Tennessee, students have really galvanized and shown up at the Tennessee state capitol for over a week to show their lawmakers that they demand more than thoughts and prayers, that we need action now to address the gun violence epidemic in the United States.
Absolutely. And, for so long, I want to circle back to that, to Republicans. I mean, it feels like Republicans have been completely ignoring and neglecting our lives. And it seems like Republican elected officials, unfortunately, will continue doing so. But I'm wondering for both of you, do you have hope that Republican elected officials will start caring anytime soon?
From my perspective, I have seen a huge shift since I started doing this work in 2012. It's really important to remember that a decade ago, a quarter of all Democrats in Congress had an A rating from the NRA. Today, none do. In fact, they proudly wear their F pins.
Yeah.
And this is how you create change, right? You get both parties to be on the right side of the issue. And this last summer, we finally passed the first federal gun safety laws in a generation, 26 years. 15 Republicans voted for that legislation. That is a seismic shift in American politics. And if you go back to a bill called Manchin-Toomey that we tried to pass in the wake of the Sandy Hook school shooting, it failed by a handful of votes in the Senate, many of those were Democrats that voted against Manchin Toomey, right? And one of those senators who no longer has her job, in fact, none of the Democratic senators who voted against Manchin Toomey still have their job. She said she was hearing 7-1 from her constituents that she should vote against Manchin Toomey. Flash forward to last summer when the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was up for a vote, and Senator Todd Young in Indiana, a Republican, said he was going to vote for the bill because he was hearing 10-1 from his constituents in favor of it, right?
Wow.
That is the grassroots work that has been done the last decade to get people to make those calls and to send those emails and to be able to drown out the gun lobby. But I do believe we are moving in that direction.
Yeah. And it really does seem like public sentiment is everything. Jayden, I'm wondering how you feel about, you've been organizing a lot in Nebraska and talking with students and elected officials there. How does the scene there look?
So I've had the opportunity to work on elections here in Nebraska for our state legislature. And I would join Shannon in saying that the common sense majority of Americans know that common sense gun laws are what's right for this country. They know that the NRA-backed agenda, that the guns everywhere agenda of some extremists in Congress, some extremists in state legislatures makes our communities less safe. And we're really seeing that in Nebraska as well. We have communities that are fighting a permitless carry bill here in Nebraska, which is coming up this legislative session. Our communities are really fighting against this, and we know that we have to keep our permitting system intact, that background checks are essential, that we need a red flag law in Nebraska, and we need red flag laws across this country.
Yeah, and those are the common sense gun measures that I hope every state will impose, and hopefully the Congress will also pass. But we're starting to see the contrast more and more between Republican state-controlled legislatures and Democratic-controlled state legislatures and governorships. And Shannon, you I know have been keeping a close eye on this, and all the states that have been passing meaningful gun legislation. And over the weekend, Washington passed HB 1240, which prohibits the sale and manufacture of assault-style weapons in the state. I know Illinois recently did that, and a bunch of other Democratic states are moving that direction. Can you talk to us more about what we've seen from those states that do have a Democratic majority and how it compares to perhaps Republican majority states?
I mean, the data is in. It's pretty intuitive, but it does prove what we assume, which is that states with stronger gun laws, mostly blue states, have less gun violence and less gun death. And red states that have weakened their gun laws have more gun violence and more gun death. I mean, we are seeing now several dozen states, I think it's 26 at this point, 25, that have passed permitless carry. This means you can carry a hidden loaded handgun in public with absolutely no background check or training. And these laws are opposed by the majority of law enforcement, the majority of constituents, and yet gun extremists and lawmakers are passing them anyway, like recently in Florida. But the good news is that we can work electorally to get those gun extremists out of office and to elect gun sense majorities and to change the gun laws. We were able to flip the Michigan legislature to a gun sense trifecta, the same in Minnesota. Maryland and Massachusetts now have gun sense trifectas because of the electoral work we're doing. And when you look at a state like Washington, again, a state we recently were able to flip, you see them making progress. And they didn't just pass an assault weapons ban, they also passed a waiting period. So I have hope that we can keep working on this electorally, legislatively, and culturally, and get this to be a voting issue in red states where parents and students are just fed up with gun extremists essentially writing our gun laws.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question, which is last week we saw in Wisconsin just tremendous youth turnout, and one of the things that really struck my attention was, I mean, one of the kind of the two biggest issues that Janet Protasiewicz ran on was abortion and democracy, and I feel like gun violence is going to be such a key issue for Democrats to run on in 2024. And as a young person, Jayden, how do you feel about how Democrats should be running on gun violence? How should they be framing the issue to reach out to as many students as possible and get students to understand the difference between what Democrats and Republicans are doing?
Democrats have to campaign on gun violence, and that's because gun violence is being seen by America's young people. The youth are facing the brunt of this crisis. Right now in the United States, gun violence is the #1 cause of death for children and teens. And Black and brown teens are more likely than their peers to face gun violence in their lifetime. We have to address this crisis. We have to, Democratic candidates have to. 120 Americans are shot and killed every day. There are communities across this country in red states and blue states and purple states that are facing this gun violence crisis. And if they want young people to come up and back them up, they have to back up young people and defend their lives.
I totally agree. And Shannon, what do you think is the right way, or what messages have you seen work when candidates campaign on gun violence? Is there something that you would encourage candidates to do who want to run on gun violence?
Well, we should be making our laws based on data, not
Yeah.
anecdote, not emotion, not fake gun lobby data. We really have to look at the policy, and we should expect our lawmakers to make policies based in data. Life-saving policies, as you said earlier, right, in these blue states that are shown to save lives. The foundation of any gun safety system is a background check on every gun sale,
Yeah.
training, secure storage laws, keeping guns away from domestic abusers and stalkers, red flag laws. But part of the problem is we're all only as safe as the closest state with the weakest gun laws. So we do need lawmakers at all levels of government to act, right? School boards, city councils, state houses, and we have to force them to, because the vast majority of constituents want this. But we also have to keep putting pressure on members of Congress to do the right thing and to make sure that this is an issue every time there's an election, which the good news is there are elections right around the corner. And if you go to gunsensevoter.org, you can see where your candidates stand on this issue. And if you text the word students to 64433, you can join people like Jayden, and you can make sure that you are getting out the vote, you are registering people to vote, and you are holding people accountable for their record on this issue.
Yes, absolutely. And when you mention data, it's not just from other states, but it's also from other countries. I mean, the kind of position that America is in right now is just so far behind other countries, and we've seen those things work hugely in those other countries. So I do agree with you that there's so much data to back this up, and it's just now a matter of electing officials who have the courage to do so. The last question I have for both of you is, I mean, what do you think is the most important thing? And Shannon, you alluded to this a little bit in your previous answer, but what do you think is the most important thing for our audience to do to make sure that we can finally live in a society where we don't have to fear for our lives and whether or not we'll be the next victims of gun violence?
I mean, you have to use your voice and your vote. You absolutely have to. This is a democracy. You can't expect other people to do the work for you. Everyone has to get off the sidelines. They have to use their voice and their vote on this issue. I'm a single issue voter. I know we don't live single issue lives, but if I can't trust that my kids are safe in their colleges or in their workplaces, then, that whole foundation of safety is missing. And so for me, I am going to the polls voting on this issue, and we need everyone, again, to text the word students to 64433 to make sure, as a parent of 5, their kids are registered to vote. They are involved in activism too. And look, we aren't just moms anymore. We are mothers and others. We are students and survivors. If you, and I would say if you're a mom watching or a parent watching, text the word ready to 64433 and a volunteer will reach out to you and tell you how you can plug in where you live. And, I defer to Jayden, and he can talk to kind of what's happening on high school and college campuses across the country.
Definitely. I think right now young people have to show up. We have to show up to tell our lawmakers that thoughts and prayers are no longer enough, that we demand action now. So I really encourage, if you're a young person, if you're anybody, call your lawmakers, call your state senators, your state house members, call your federal representatives, and tell them how gun violence impacts you and demands that they take action. You can organize on your college campuses, at your high school, your city council, school board level, work with your local government to demand gun sense policies in your community. And right now, Students Demand Action is launching an industry accountability campaign that asks college campuses to divest from the gun industry. And if you'd like to become involved with that, that is something so important that you can do working with Students Demand Action.
And Victor, I want to add one more thing, which is run for office. Once you have the skills to shape policy, it's kind of intuitive that you want to make it. And we have a program called Demand a Seat, where our volunteers, students, and Moms Demand Action volunteers are running for office. We just elected 140 of our own volunteers and survivors to office in November, up and down the ballot, all across the country. And it makes a difference when you have those people at the table.
That's extraordinary. You two are doing such amazing work and showing all of us that, this is a really long and exhausting fight, but we have to stay in this fight because we can't allow this to be the new normal. We have to keep on being outraged, angry, and at the end of the day, we have to keep on voting and volunteering and fighting for a better life. And I just can't tell you how much I'm grateful for both of the work that you do and always shining a light on this issue. So thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Well, that was an episode that gave me so much hope. At the same time, I wish we weren't living in this country where basically every day we have to fear whether or not we have to go to school or, go to the grocery store and be the next victims of gun violence. In fact, this morning, there's new reporting that there is unfortunately been another mass shooting in Louisville, Kentucky. So far, 5 people have been shot and killed, and 6 people have been injured. That's as of the last time I checked, which was about 20 minutes ago. It's just devastating. It's every single morning. I'm here on the West Coast, so I don't get up as early as those on the East Coast. But when I woke up, that was the first thing I saw. And it's just, that's the world we live in. And it feels like this is normal, but we can't allow this to be normal. We have to be outraged every time we see this. We can't become numb to this, because the moment we become numb to this, we allow the people like the NRA and the gun lobbying manufacturers to win. We can't accept this as our new normal. We have to keep on pushing back. And just like both Shannon and Jayden said, volunteer, go on Moms Demand Action, their website, go on the Students Demand Action website, make a difference, run for office if you want, state and local level offices. Those are also extremely, extremely important. So just stay in the fight, stay in the arena, as Teddy Roosevelt once said, because I do think something is changing, especially after Tennessee last week, that we are reaching a moment in which both older generations and especially younger generations feel pissed off at Republicans and what they're trying to do with our lives, that they would rather expel 2 Black young people than actually pass meaningful gun legislation. It's revolting on all levels. And just on that note of Tennessee, Justin Pearson and Justin Jones, who were both expelled last week, they will be going through a vote basically this week. Today it's Justin Jones, and on Wednesday it's Justin Pearson. Basically, their city council will be voting on whether or not to reinstate them. So pay attention to those votes. I know all of us will be watching very closely, but please pay attention to what's happening down in Tennessee, because that's literally kind of fascism happening before our very own eyes. And I think it's up to all of us to pay attention and make sure that we put pressure on those Republican elected officials and those state commissioners to make sure that they do the right thing and they reinstate them back into office, because I know, those are really 2 amazing representatives, and there's a reason why Republicans expelled them. It's because they're articulate, they are talented, they are young, they are Black, they are everything that Republicans feel threatened by electorally, and also they pose a threat to their actual ability to maintain power. But I think after what happened in Tennessee last week, Republicans did themselves a very, very bad thing. One other thing, which is I can't end this episode without talking about the ruling on Friday. Basically, a Trump judge in Texas ruled against the FDA's decision to approve mifepristone, which is a drug that's been on the market for years. It's undergone vigorous FDA testing and approval. It's safer than Viagra and Tylenol, but yet this judge, without any standing, and it seems like every single legal analyst I've heard on TV and talked to says there's been absolutely no standing for this decision. It's just yet another kind of attempt by a Republican judge to limit a woman's access to reproductive rights. But mifepristone is a life-saving drug, and this judge basically struck it down. Now, there was another judge in Washington, D.C. that upheld mifepristone, so it seems like the appeals court is going to go through this, or maybe it might go up to the Supreme Court, which who knows what will happen in that case. But right now, what you're seeing, I think, is another instance of Republicans really trying to strip away abortion. It's all up to all of us to pay attention to what's happening in the courts, because what's happening in Texas is not just a one-off event. This is a part of their scheme to make it harder for women to access basic reproductive rights, abortion medication. And it's also just the first step in a series of laws. And I want this to be understood very clearly. This is the first step in a series of acts, I think, to limit a bunch of other rights. I mean, we saw this with Clarence Thomas's opinion in Dobbs. It's not just about abortion rights and reproductive rights. It's about other things like interracial marriage, like same-sex marriage. Those are the things that Republicans are coming after, voting rights. We have to pay attention to, because this is a slow chipping away at our rights. And thank goodness, hopefully the appeals court and the Supreme Court does the right thing, but I'm not very confident anymore. But hopefully they will. But right now, what we're seeing in Texas should be a stark indicator of what's to come with Republicans. These people are not backing down with abortion. They're trying to make our lives harder by the day, and we have to be outraged and alarmed. And the only way that we can create long-lasting, meaningful change is by actually voting. And that's what's going to happen in 2024. I really hope that all of us really pay attention to those down ballot races, because that's where the issues, and I think that's where we can make the biggest difference. So that's all the news I have for you today. I'll be back tomorrow with a new episode of On the Move. Just a quick programming note. We've got a very exciting next couple of days lined up for you. Tomorrow, we're going to have on Olivia Juliana, who is, as you all know, an amazing abortion rights activist. She raised money when Matt Gaetz attacked her for quote unquote, for her body, basically. She's amazing. She's an inspiration to so many I know. So Olivia Juliana will join me tomorrow. On Wednesday, Cenk Uygur will join me. He's the host of the Young Turks, to talk about, a new form of media for young people and what he's trying to do. On Thursday, some of you may know her. I definitely know her from her MSNBC appearances and her hashtag Sisters-in-Law. Joyce Vance will be joining me on Thursday to talk about all of the legal developments of the day. And then on Friday, Fred Wellman will join me to talk about the Republican craziness. We've got a packed week. You don't want to miss it. We'll be back every day this week at 11 a.m. Eastern time, 8 a.m. Pacific time. Don't miss it. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. I look forward to this week. I know we have a lot to talk about, and I'm grateful to be doing it alongside all of you. So thank you all for joining, and I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Monday.